It's over, I'm gone, I'm through the door. Good and evil aren't at odds anymore. It's all explained, they reconcile. Tell every idol and every tone, come on. Let's go, scream and shout. We always know what it's all about. Let's go, it's broken through. Our lives are beating and we all know what to do. Silence the soul and to live a new truth. Take the final journey and giving us proof. So start out some questions and the answer you see. How awesome the world is, how now it can be. Come on. The deserts are bloody and the skies are all clear. The oceans are calm and the animals cheer. I wanna live it, breathe it in. The new one is here, now let's just let it begin. Let's go, scream and shout. We humans know what it's all about. Let's go, we're broken through. Our lives are beating and we all know what to do. Liberation. Liberation. So join liberation, leave the darkness behind. The old radiant truth will enlighten your mind. Live in the moment for the future we see. The human condition is so. We're all free. Yeah, let's go, scream and shout. We always know what it's all about. Let's go, we're broken through. Our lives are beating and we all know what to do. Let's go, scream and shout. We always know what it's all about. Let's go, we're broken through. Our lives are beating and we all know what to do. Yeah, come on.
So, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another one of our live events. This time we'll be watching and discussing Jeremy Griffith's amazingly helpful presentation, The Shock of Change That Understanding of the Human Condition Brings. So we're really happy to be here with you. It's just these opportunities to come together to talk about these wonderful understandings and the impact they have on our lives, and that they redeem us all by bringing biological explanation to our horrifically messed up but heroic human journey, and that understanding brings sanity and happiness back to life on planet Earth is just so precious. So we're really glad that you could join us today. I'm Genevieve and I'm sitting next to Tony Gowing, and you might know that Tony is one of the leaders of the WTM, our project, and that's because of his clear-sightedness in really knowing what it means to have understanding of the human condition, and he leads the way in taking up the transformed way of living that is possible now with this information. So Tony's going to briefly introduce Jeremy's talk. That'll go for about an hour, and then afterwards we'll have a bit of a discussion about that. So before Tony introduces Jeremy, I just thought I'd introduce all of you to our little panel of WTM members from our centres around the world. So on screen with us, we have, along with Tony and I here in Australia, we have Sammy Belfield and Stacey Roger from WTM Sydney. We have Nicole Vlahakis from WTM Melbourne. In South Africa, we have James Moffat. We were hoping to have Reggie Kotshobi. He hasn't been able to connect at this stage, but he may. So James is from our centre in Cape Town and Reggie from Eastern Cape Centre. We have Karen Boone from WTM Staffordshire in the UK, Jerry Sinonge from WTM Philadelphia in the US, and Stefan Rosler from WTM Austria. So you'll get to hear from them a bit more shortly. And I might just mention that if you're watching our live event on our Facebook group or on our website, our admin team will provide a link to the transcript in the comments. So just keep an eye out for that, because that might help you to follow along with what Jeremy's explaining. And as always, we just absolutely love hearing your questions and your comments. So please put them in the comment section as we go. So, Tone. Oh, and I'm so sorry. We've got Sal Edgar as well from WTM Sydney. I didn't introduce her. Sal's just filling in for Reggie, who couldn't make it. Well, we're hoping he might still make it. We'll see. So, Tone, would you like to just say a few words?
Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Eve. It's just so exciting to be able to talk about the human condition, to come together and every new video, publication, document, any bit of writing that Jeremy does is just a staggering, nearly unbelievable sort of, taking humanity forward. And so we've got another absolute amazing. I mean, he's the most advanced thinker ever to walk the planet, and we're just lucky enough to be talking to him, and because he lives outside of the human condition and just can see it all so clearly and explain it all to us. And I mean, just as a way of introducing or sort of getting us started, hopefully just for a second, I was just going to bring up the image, the chasm drawing that Jeremy has done for us, because I just love Jeremy's drawings. They're just so beautifully context, whatever the point that Jeremy's making for us. And you can just see in that drawing, that big, deep, dark, foreboding abyss of depression, which is the human condition. And it's just overwhelming all our lives, the whole world, every single piece of behaviour, all of our everything, every part of our society, all of our thoughts are just drenched and all coming off that pit of deep, dark insecurity and depression that the human condition causes in all of our lives. And you can see it's just that depression, that human condition is driving us and forcing us to live in this cave-like dead existence, and driving us towards this, possible, if we don't get this human condition explanation out to the world, the extinction of the human race through terminal alienation. So it's a serious situation that we're in, the human species. And we really, 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 really need these understandings that Jeremy's given us to get out to the world. So what we're doing, what we're talking about, is honestly the most important thing that is going on in the planet right now. But we're here to watch Jeremy present his latest work, and that's the shock of change. And well, as you saw in that image, where we're going is from that horrible cave-like human condition afflicted state. But what's on offer is a glorious sunshine highway bridge across that depression. We can leave all the horror and the darkness of the human condition behind, and we can just live in golden sunshine of knowledge, of understanding, and totally compassionate about all the horror that's come to pass on Earth from humans. So I just thought I'd read the back cover of the book just to get us started, and then let's hear from Jeremy. So it says, as biologist Jeremy Griffith explains in the interview, and if you haven't watched it, that is a place to start, and really you shouldn't be watching this until you've watched the interview at least a few times. And also The Great Guilt, there is obviously the second talk in our main video section. Go and watch it. It explains why the human condition is such an off-limit subject. But Yeah, as Jeremy Griffith explains in the interview, which psychiatrist Professor Harry Prosen described as the most important interview of all time, while we humans lack the explanation for our 2 million year corrupted human condition, we had no choice but to deny that our distant ape ancestors lived in a state of cooperative and loving innocence. But with the good reason for our corrupted condition now finally found, our species' original state of innocence can at last be admitted. And as Griffith makes clear in his essay, The Great Guilt, what that honesty finally allows us to see is the immense guilt and shame that we humans have been carrying for corrupting our original instinctive self or soul. Finding the redeeming understanding of our corrupted condition also means we no longer need to employ the artificial reinforcements we have been depending on to sustain our sense of self-worth, of attacking, defying and denying the implication that we are guilty bad people. What this essay, The Shock of Change that understanding the human condition brings, addresses is how to manage the great shock of change that inevitably occurs with this fabulous transformation from having to depend on our now obsoleted, artificial, angry, egocentric and alienating forms of reinforcement to living free of them. So this little booklet is a handbook for how we make the transition from deeply dark, on the path to terminal alienation, to the most wonderful, exciting existence that can possibly be imagined for each and every human. So let's watch that now.
Welcome to this July 2022 presentation about managing the shock of change that inevitably occurs with the arrival now of the all-wonderful, all-meaningful and all-exciting human condition resolved new world for you and for the whole human race. Now, you might like to print out the transcript of this talk to help you follow what will be explained. This shock of change stage is highlighted with a red circle in my drawing of humanity's journey from ignorance to enlightenment. You can see that humanity has progressed from an innocent but ignorant childhood. Then, when we became conscious some 2 million years ago, through an upset, angry, egocentric and alienated human condition afflicted adolescence. Adolescence being the stage in which we search for our identity, in particular for understanding of why we corrupted our original state of innocence. With the finding of that understanding, humanity enters an enlightened adulthood in which we are secure in our understanding of ourselves. What the red circle highlights is the initial shock of change that the human race is now going through following the arrival of this dreamed-of ability to finally understand ourselves. As I said, this talk is about managing that particular paradigm-shifting shock of change. Now, before getting into this talk about the shock of change that understanding of the human condition brings, I want to show you this picture of the fossilized skulls of our ancestors, under which I've included descriptions of the psychological stages of maturation that each ancestor was going through. These stages are all explained in Chapter 8 of my book, Freedom. This sequence also indicates that our big brain, with its large association cortex or thinking conscious cortex, appeared some 2 million years ago, which corresponds to the top of the first hill in my humanity's journey picture. The red zigzag is where the upset human condition began, with the emergence of consciousness and its conflict with our instincts. Interestingly, the pronounced neotenized, childlike, domed forehead, wide-eyed, snub-nosed features of us humans today, Homo sapiens sapiens, also indicates how much we've been chasing the image of innocence for sexual destruction in the latter part of our 2 million year journey through upset, which is a tragic development that is explained in paragraph 787 of Freedom. So, to now address the issue of the immense shock of change that the arrival of the dreamed of human race liberating understanding of the human condition can't help but cause. Now, firstly, I need to emphasise that during our 2 million year adolescent stage, which we're just coming out of, when we couldn't explain our corrupted condition, we had no choice other than to live in denial of it. Until we found understanding of our corrupted condition, denial of it saved us from unbearable condemnation. As I point out in all my writings, without the redeeming understanding of our species' upset, corrupted, fallen human condition, and of our own upset, corrupted, fallen condition as a result of it, it's been impossible for virtually anyone to confront and be honest about the human condition. We couldn't face and be honest about the corruption of our original, all-loving and all-sensitive, instinctive self or soul, while we couldn't explain why we were seemingly so stupid, irresponsible, and at fault for destroying such a beautiful existence. We couldn't face the truth of our corrupted condition while we were unable to defend ourselves against the implication that behaving in such a non-loving, divisive, competitive, and aggressive, psychologically upset way meant we were bad, worthless, even evil beings. This situation left us collectively and individually with no choice but to keep adding more and more layers of protective denial to cope with the horror of our ever-increasing, soul-corrupted and soul-corrupting condition. Because any time we tried to go back and confront and be honest about our corrupted condition, only reconnected us with the unbearable, depressing implication that we were bad, worthless, soul-destroying, evil monsters. So this is where the whole human race has been trapped, having no choice but to accept that until the human race's great heroic, upsetting search for knowledge finally led to the finding of the redeeming, relieving and healing good reason for why we corrupted our soul, almost everyone had no choice but to resign themselves to having to hide in Plato's dark cave of denial of our soul-corrupted and soul-corrupting human condition. And this process of resignation is explained in Freedom Essay 30, and Plato's cave allegory is described in Video Freedom Essay 11. Certainly, we could gain some artificial reinforcement and relief for our immensely distressed, guilt-ridden, insecure situation by winning as much power, fame, fortune and glory as we could. And then certainly through taking up support of a religion where we deferred to the soundness and truthful words of a prophet, we could to some degree counter the dishonest denial of our corrupted condition. And we could certainly find some superficial makes-you-feel-good relief from being so corrupted by supporting a pseudo-idealistic movement like the political correct woke movement or the environmental green movement. And we could certainly try to superficially therapize our corrupted condition by calming our distressed mind through such practices as meditation or by taking mind-altering drugs or by undertaking a course of positive thinking or even a course in mind-disconnecting non-thinking. But such artificial reinforcements of our corrupted condition, or partial honesty about being corrupted, or escapist relief from being corrupted, or superficial therapy for our corrupted condition, still left virtually everyone firmly stuck in Plato's cave of denial, unable to confront and be honest about the unbearably depressing issue of our soul-corrupted and soul-corrupting, seemingly human race-destroying human condition. Without the redeeming biological explanation for our corrupted condition, denial of it was all that has been possible for virtually everyone. So yes, we could find any number of ways to achieve some superficial and artificial relief from the shame and insecurity caused by our species' 2 million year corrupted condition. But without the redeeming explanation for it, virtually everyone has been trapped, having to live out their lives as a desperately insecure, almost totally dishonest and deluded human. The truth is, human life has been a life of excruciating torture. I mean, sure, we had to try to hide the fact that we've been living such a horrible existence by putting on a brave face and maintaining an outward happy and positive appearance. Because again, if we were honest about our horrifically soul-corrupted and soul-corrupting condition, it only made living in that state unbearably, suicidally depressing. Denial has been our stock in trade, our only way of coping. Being stuck in Plato's dark cave of denial and pretense and delusion has been the life virtually all humans have heroically had to endure for some 2 million years. As the essay on resignation explains, during adolescence almost everyone had no choice but to resign themselves to blocking out the truth of their and almost everyone else's horrifically soul-corrupted and soul-corrupting condition. And instead of pretend that they were living a happy, secure, guilt-free, sound, well-adjusted, everything is fine, I'm a good person life. But every child who came into this world of resigned adults knew it was an almost totally dishonest and deluded, seemingly completely mad, extremely soul-destroyed, utterly artificial and superficial world. These pre-resigned lyrics from the young American heavy metal band With Life in Mind reveal the truth about the real nature of our world. So I'll just read them. It scares me to death to think what I have become. So these are the true words of an unresigned adolescent. It scares me to death to think what I have become. I feel so lost in the world. Our innocence is lost. I scream to the sky, but my words get lost along the way. I can't express all the hate that's led me here and all the filth that swallows us whole. I don't want to be part of all this insanity, famine and death, pestilence and war. A world shrouded in darkness, fear is driven into our minds everywhere we look. Trying so hard for a life with such little purpose. Lost in oblivion. Everything you've been told has been a lie. We've all been asleep since the beginning of time. Why are we so scared to use our minds? Keep pretending soon enough things will crumble to the ground. If they could only see the truth, they would coil in disgust. How do we save ourselves from this misery, so desperate for the answers? We're straining on the last bit of hope we have left. No one hears us hears our cries. No one sees us screaming. This is the end. Now, this is a similar truthful description of the mad with pain and anger, utterly dishonest and deluded, resigned world that we've been living in. And this time it comes from Christ, who had one of the most honest, denial-free, sound minds in recorded history. You can see my description and demystification of Christ in Freedom Essay 39. Bitterness of the fire that blazes in the bodies of men and in their marrow, kindling in them night and day, and burning the limbs of men and making their minds become drunk and their souls become deranged. Woe to you captives, for you are bound in caverns. So that's another Plato-like reference to being imprisoned in a cave. You laugh, in mad laughter you rejoice. You neither realize your perdition, nor do you reflect on your circumstances, nor have you understood that you dwell in darkness and death. On the contrary, You are drunk with the fire and full of bitterness. Your mind is deranged on account of the burning that is in you, and sweet to you are the poison and the blows of your enemies. And the darkness rose for you like the light, for you surrendered your freedom for servitude. You darkened your hearts and surrendered your thoughts to folly, and you filled your thoughts with the smoke of the fire that is in you. And your light has hidden in the cloud of darkness, and the garment that is put upon you, you pursued with deceit. And you were seized by the hope that does not exist. And who is it that you have believed? Do you not know that you all dwell among those who lie? And you boast as though you had hope. You baptized your souls in the water of darkness. You walked by your own whims. Now, this amazingly honest quote comes from the book of Thomas, which is a recording of a conversation Christ had with one of his disciples called Thomas. And I might mention, because I think it's very interesting, that earlier in this conversation, when Christ says to Thomas, "It's been said that you are my twin and true companion," I think Christ is referring to Thomas being one of those rare, unresigned people like himself. And such a person would have been a true companion in Christ's lonely task of defying the cave-dwelling, dishonest world of denial that we live in. The great Scottish psychiatrist R.D. Laing was equally honest about our corrupted, soul-destroying and repressing, split from our true selves or soul, alienated condition, when he wrote that our alienation goes to the roots. The realisation of this is the essential springboard for any serious reflection on any aspect of present interhuman life. We are born into a world where alienation awaits us. We are potentially men, but are in an alienated state. The ordinary person is a shriveled, desiccated fragment of what a person can be. As adults, we have forgotten most of our childhood, not only its contents but its flavour. As men of the world, we hardly know of the existence of the inner world. The condition of alienation, of being asleep, of being unconscious, of being out of one's mind, is the condition of the normal man. Between us and it, which is our soul, there is a veil which is more like 50 foot of solid concrete. Des abscondus, we have absconded. The outer, divorced from any illumination from the inner, is a state of darkness. We are in an age of darkness. The state of our outer darkness is a state of sin, i.e. alienation or estrangement from the inner light. We are all murderers and prostitutes. We are bemused and crazed creatures, strangers to our true selves and to one another. We are dead but think we are alive. We are asleep but think we are awake. We are dreaming but take our dreams to be reality. We are the halt, lame, blind, deaf and sick. But we are doubly unconscious. We are so ill that we no longer feel ill, as in many terminal illnesses. We are mad but have no insight into the fact of our madness. We are so out of touch with this realm, where the issue of our corrupted human condition lies, that many people can now argue seriously that it doesn't exist. So that's a true description of our immensely insecure, soul blocked out and alienated human situation or condition. What I now want to describe is how being able to explain and understand our corrupted condition ends the need for denial of it, and how a whole new world opens up for the human race where we are free of the agony of the human condition. Finding the redeeming, guilt-lifting, good reason for our horrifically corrupted, angry, egocentric and alienated human condition completely changes the situation we have been in. Now that we finally have the fully accountable and thus verifiable and thus trustable, first principle based, biological, scientific explanation of the good reason for why we corrupted our original all-loving and all-sensitive instinctive self or soul. Our whole 2 million year torturous condition ends. With the understanding of the human condition at last found, we are no longer trapped in Plato's cold, dark cave of denial and delusion, and we are free to come out into the warm, healing sunshine of the compassionate, full truth of the redeeming and dignifying understanding of ourselves. Our insecurity about being corrupted ends. We can finally understand that we are all good and not bad. And what this means is that all our old artificial, superficial, dishonest and deluded ways of coping are no longer needed. We are free to leave all that fake and in truth horrid practices behind as finished with. We can finally transition from living in a dreadful state of denial and delusion to living in a wonderfully transformed state of freedom from all the dishonesty and delusion that has made human life so fraudulent, mad, destructive, and chaotic. In fact, all the in truth extreme shallowness and emptiness and loneliness of that cold and dark, dishonest and deluded, immensely destructive existence is able to be replaced by so much relief, happiness, and healthiness now that we will find it's almost too exciting for our bodies to bear. We go from living an existence tortured by the horror of the human condition to a life free of that horror. Basically, we humans now come back to life after having had to endure living in an effectively dead state. As with Life and Mind and R.D. Laing made clear, 2 million years of accumulated upset has left us in a numb, seared, effectively dead state. But we are finally free now from having to live trapped in Plato's deathly dark, deep, cold cave of denial and delusion. The whole human race wakes up from what has in truth been a terrible, terrible nightmare. We are free to all come back to life now. The great transformation of the whole human race is on. In Chapter 9 of my book, Freedom, I describe how understanding the human condition obsoletes the deluded and artificial ways of proving we're good and not bad, such as by winning as much power, fame, fortune and glory as we can, or by supporting a pseudo-idealistic cause like in the environmental or PC woke movements that make us feel good. So these ways of living are obsoleted, which allows everyone to take up a fabulously relieving and healing transformed way of living, where you live in support of the redeeming understanding of the human condition. While Chapter 9 of Freedom gives an overall description of how this completely wonderful transformation takes place, Video Essay 33 provides a specific description of how to let go and leave that old insecure, have to prove you're good and not bad ways of living and adopt a new human condition-free, transformed way of living where you can live a fabulously meaningful and joyous life in support of the redeeming understanding of our corrupted condition. What immediately needs to be emphasised here is that with humanity's immensely heroic, but at the same time immensely upsetting, search for the redeeming understanding, explanation or understanding of our corrupted condition finally over, not only can everyone leave the old, now obsoleted way of sustaining their sense of self-worth and instead adopt the new transformed way of living, everyone actually has to leave that old way of living and instead live in support of understanding the human condition. Now, what makes everyone have to make this transition is not the dictates from some outside authoritarian regime or the imposition of a dogma-based pseudo-idealistic culture, but the imposition of the unassailable logic that the old, selfish, artificial ways of living are destroying our world and making human life completely unbearable. And since those ways of living are now no longer needed, there is no justification at all for continuing that way of living. Adopting the transformed way of living is what everyone can and therefore has to do to save humankind. I should clarify, as I do in Freedom Essay 33, that the focus in leaving the old world of artificial reinforcement isn't on giving up your possessions or walking the streets in sackcloth in self-denial and servitude. We're talking about a change of mindset that can have an effect on your priorities, which can affect your choice of possessions and so forth, but the focus isn't on self-deprivation. I also want to point out that in my book, Death by Dogma, in paragraphs 85 and 86, I describe how we humans have always known that one day we had to mature from living in an insecure, competitive and aggressive state to living in a secure, cooperative and loving state. But being unable to confront the human condition and by so doing find the understanding that actually makes that transformation possible, out of sheer desperation, it was decided to just fake it to make it, which is what the critical theory-based PC, woke, Great Reset movement was trying to do. Now, while such fakeness was never going to work, as Death by Dogma makes very clear, it does reveal how intuitively anticipated and needed this great transformation is. So yes, taking up the transformed way of living is all important. That's absolutely true and fundamental. But the focus of this presentation is on what everyone will initially particularly want to know, and that is, how are we to cope with the initial shock of having our 2 million year corrupted condition suddenly exposed? How are we to manage the initial inevitable shock that the human race has to go through on the way to becoming transformed? As I depicted in my drawing of the stages humanity goes through in its progression from ignorance to enlightenment, it's inevitable that when understanding of the human condition finally arrives after 2 million years of living without it and having no choice but to live in denial of the whole issue of our corrupted condition, the resigned world is going to be in shock at what has happened. Having become deeply attached and accustomed to living in denial of our corrupted condition, having the truth about that state suddenly revealed cannot help but come as a great shock. So I now want to present the focus of this talk, which is the shock of change stage that the human race now goes through. This shock of change progresses through a number of predictable stages, which I've illustrated with some drawings. It makes sense that initially everyone will be stunned for a little while, staggered by what's happened and in a state of overwhelmed astonishment, needing time to take in, absorb and adapt to what's occurred. The arrival of understanding of ourselves that the whole human race has so heroically fought so long for isn't initially met with celebration, excitement and relief, but by a great silence. Nonplussed paralysis is more like what happens. In his famous 1970 book, Future Shock, I know Alvin Toffler was anticipating this initial bewildering effect of the arrival of understanding of the human condition when he wrote of, the shattering stress and disorientation we induce in individuals by subjecting them to too much change in too short a time. Of course, what the minds of resigned adults quickly do to cope with this shock of having their corrupted condition exposed is determinedly apply the denial that they've been employing up to this point to hold that truth at bay. Basically, their mind doesn't tolerate admission of it. And the result of this defensive blocking out of description and analysis of the human condition in the minds of resigned adults is that they typically find it difficult to take in or absorb or hear what's being presented. their mind doesn't let what's being said come through into conscious awareness. It suffers from what we refer to as the deaf effect. And this protective deafness can be extreme. I mean, as one resigned adult admitted, when I first read this material, all I saw were a lot of black marks on white paper. Since this denial is happening unwittingly, subconsciously, because the surface conscious mind obviously doesn't want to recognise and admit that it's being defensive, the surface conscious mind's natural response is to blame the presentation for its inability to hear it. I mean, typical responses include saying that the presentation is impenetrably dense and too repetitive of vague points and so badly written it desperately needs editing. In fact, the deaf effect is quite often so great that in frustration we are asked to please send me an executive summary because I can't make any sense of what you're presenting. However, this deaf effect can be overcome by persevering with reading about and listening to descriptions of the redeeming, reconciling and healing explanation and how it makes sense of every aspect of human existence. With perseverance, the resigned mind gradually realises that what is being presented is not condemning but compassionate. And it's therefore safe now to learn about and finally understand the whole 2 million year immensely corrupting but immensely heroic journey the human race has been on to find this understanding of our corrupted condition. I know the great guilt video essay and video 11 give an in-depth description of the issue of the deaf effect. What will make all the difference to the initial huge problem of so many people suffering from the deaf effect and being unable to hear and appreciate these human race-saving understandings of the human condition is a critical mass of people appearing who have overcome the deaf effect and realised and are telling others that the human condition has finally been solved. People's willingness to persevere with listening and reading about the human condition rapidly increases once there's enough people saying that the redeeming and healing explanation of the human condition has finally been found and that it's now safe and necessary for everyone to learn about the human condition. So overcoming the huge problem of the deaf effect block and gaining a wide public acceptance and support for this absolutely critically important breakthrough depends on building a critical mass of support. Also, of immense significance to humanity, completing this journey to enlightenment is that once a person is able to overcome the deaf effect and can access and thus appreciate the explanation of the human condition, they are then in a position to take up the transformed way of living where they selflessly live in support of the understandings of the human condition rather than selfishly maintain their old, now obsoleted, artificial power and glory, pseudo-idealistic ways of sustaining their sense of self-worth. And now, naturally, this transformation from the old habituated denial-based way of living doesn't happen immediately. The first response, once a person is able to get through the deaf effect, is to keep reading about and listening to explanation of the human condition, and by so doing, be able to make sense of every aspect of human life. Having lived without any truthful, accountable understanding of human existence, it's extremely interesting and relieving and healing to finally have such insight. So this guzzling of the truth about human life normally goes on in earnest in this initial stage. when resigned adults have more or less given up trying to find understanding of the nature and purpose of human existence, because in their resigned state of living in denial of the human condition, all resigned adults subconsciously knew that all the mechanistic scientific explanations of human life are based on on the same dishonest denial that they are practicing. Suddenly, there's so many accountable and clearly truthful understandings to digest. You can read more about mechanistic science's dishonest denial of the human condition in chapter 2.4 of Freedom. However, even though all these explanations about human existence are based on the compassionate, redeeming understanding of the good reason for why we humans became corrupted, these insights are not only going to be immensely interesting, they are necessarily also going to be exposing and thus confronting of all that corruption. Ideally, a person would be able to make sense of and heal all their soul-damaged hurts they experienced growing up in an immensely human condition-stricken world at the same speed as they're able to understand the human condition. But the reality is that understanding of our corrupted condition occurs much faster than we can connect with and dismantle all the layers of repressed psychological pain within us. In fact, it's going to take a number of generations for the understanding we now have of the human condition to heal all the psychosis in us. Because, knowing to the point of being able to be psychologically secure follows some time after understanding, and the degree we are still insecure is the degree we can feel confronted and exposed by the truth of our corrupted condition. The Truth Day, Honesty Day, Transparency Day, Exposure Day, Revelation Day, Come Clean Day, that the arrival of understanding of the human condition represents is actually the long-feared so-called Judgment Day, anticipated in religious texts. And even though Judgment Day is actually a time of compassionate understanding, not a time of condemnation, as an anonymous Turkish poet once said, Judgment Day is not the day of judgment, but the day of understanding. It is nevertheless a time when the extent of our corrupted condition is revealed. Now, naturally, the more upset a person is as a result of their particular encounter with humanity's heroic but upsetting search for knowledge, the more upset there is to be exposed, and therefore the more confronting these understandings of the human condition will initially likely be. Even though upset has now been explained as an immensely heroic condition and that everyone is equally good and worthwhile, this shock of the sudden exposure of our upset condition can initially cause almost everyone, but the more upset in particular, to want to defensively retreat back into the habituated safety of Plato's dark cave of denial. There will be a temptation to want to deny and even determinedly attack analysis of the human condition. Indeed, we in the WTM have had to endure decades of this malicious and often ruthless attacks upon us and our project of delivering these human race-saving understandings of the human condition, which these attacks you can read about in the persecution of the WTM essay. However, since this understanding of the human condition is what is desperately needed to save the human race from terminal alienation and extinction, retreating back into denial of all the fully accountable, truthful understandings is not a viable option for anyone. So that leaves the question of how then is the upset human race, the more upset in particular, supposed to cope with the exposure? The obvious answer is that everyone needs to assess how much of the truthful explanation of the human condition they can cope with and avoid confronting more of it than their degree of soundness of self can cope with. Now, what this means is that the process of hearing and reading about the truthful explanation of all aspects of human life that is now available has to be tempered by how much truth a person can cope with. Guzzling this information can be dangerous. The reality is that everyone only needs to investigate these explanations of the human condition sufficiently to verify that they are the truthful explanations of the human race, that the human race has been so desperately in search of, and then avoid confronting and investigating them beyond what their security of self can cope with. On reaching that point, what each person needs to do is change their focus from studying the understandings to supporting them. Everyone should verify the truth, then support it at a comfortable distance from it. And living in support of these human race saving understandings, is a completely satisfying, meaningful existence. So there's no particular negative or penalty or downside in not overly studying them. In fact, the transformed way of living, where you focus on living in support of these understandings, these world-saving understandings, is so exciting and fulfilling that, as I said earlier, it's almost more than our body can cope with. So the transformed way of living or state serves two purposes. It's how we leave the old selfish, now human race destroying artificial way of sustaining our sense of self-worth, and it's how we avoid overly studying the explanation of the human condition. And I should point out that, as I mentioned in paragraph 1188 of Freedom, in the old evasive world, to enter university, you had to pass an entrance exams that assessed your IQ, your intelligence quotient, and resulting ability to study complex subjects like higher mathematics or physics. Well, in the new human condition resolved new world, it similarly makes sense that the exceptionally sound, those with a high SQ, which is a soul or soundness quotient, are the ones most suited to studying the human condition. And there's absolutely no shame in that demarcation. Again, it's a fundamental insight that understanding of the human condition gives us of the equal goodness and worthiness of all humans. We humans have been involved in a great and necessary battle. So we have inevitably all been variously knocked around in that great battle. But we are all heroes. With those who don't have a high SQ, arguably the greatest heroes, because they must have been involved in the thick of the battle during the infancy and childhood. So exposure of our corrupted condition can be managed, and it should be pointed out that the human race would not have been so determinedly to find understanding of our corrupt condition if we didn't believe we would be able to cope with the exposure of it when it was found. I mean, so many of our songs that anticipate our freedom from the human condition are songs of rejoicement, and they wouldn't be so joyful if we thought that freedom couldn't be coped with. I know Freedom Essay 45 has lots of songs about the joyous anticipations of our freedom from the human condition. Another problem that develops as people digest these understandings of the human condition is what we refer to as the Mexican standoff. This is where a person knows and accepts that the explanation of the human condition is true, but struggles to let go of their old, now obsoleted, and now extremely selfish, destructive and dangerous ways of sustaining this sense of self-worth, and instead adopt the new transformed way of living. People can feel stuck between not wanting to retreat back into denial, but not yet being able to appreciate enough the immense importance and exhilarating benefits of taking up the transformed way of living. I think it's FAQ 1.23 provides a powerful description of the problem of the Mexican standoff. And in Freedom Essay 33, which I referred to earlier, I explain how to overcome the Mexican standoff by letting go of the now obsoleted but often extremely strong habituated attachment resigned adults have to the power, fame and fortune and glory trophy room, ego castle of pre-human conditions, old world wins and successes, or of attachments to pseudo-idealistic virtue signalling strategies, and instead taking up the new, infinitely more satisfying and world-saving, important, transformed way of living. As with overcoming the problem of the death effect, the more people there are who appreciate that the transformed way of living is the only way to solve the world's problems, and also how relieving and exciting a way of living it is, the more encouraged and thus easier it will be for others to take up the transformed way of living. In fact, as I point out in paragraph 1207 of Freedom, where I talk about the importance and power of the transformed way of living. Before long, those still living in the old embattled have to prove your worth way of living will feel like they have been caught wearing last year's fashions. What now needs to be explained is that while the fabulously meaningful and joyous human race-saving new fashion of the transformed state is having to go through this inevitable but actually pointless initial procrastination Mexican standoff stage, there are a number of devious manoeuvres and avoidance strategies that occur, which we're in the WTM are all too familiar with. There's what we call pocketing the win, where people's attachment to their egocentric way of living, in which they sustain their sense of self-worth by building an ego castle of power, fame, fortune and glory, wins can be so great that they avoid taking up the transformed way of living and instead focus on finding ways to selfishly benefit from understanding the human condition. This includes the blatant exploitation of the understandings, where people use the insights they have gained into human behaviour to be an even more successful winner of power, fame, fortune and glory. It's obviously a big advantage in business or competition to have insight into human behaviour, but exploiting that to make yourself successful and financially rich in the old world is an obscene misuse of this world-saving information. As well as almost literally pocketing the win by ripping off the understandings to make yourself an old world legend, there are other pocketing the win responses that are more focused on finding ways to escape feeling cornered by the logic that says you have to let go your artificial ways of sustaining your sense of self-worth and instead take up the transformed way of living. We call such escapes from taking up the transformed way of living side-dooring. Feeling cornered by having to let go your now obsoleted but habituated castle-building way of validating yourself does tempt people to try to find a side door way of avoiding the transformed way of living. To describe the most common example of this practice of side-dooring, it's natural and beneficial to continue studying explanation of the human condition and deepening your understanding of yourself and of the world. But when the Mexican standoff cornered feeling develops, this guzzling of the information can be developed into a way of avoiding the cornered feelings. Certainly, everyone needs to be using these understandings to help make sense of their lives and the world around them, and even to heal their version of humanity's 2 million years psychological upset. But to focus on doing that while avoiding adopting the transformed way of living when that is so needed to solve the world's problems is at base another way of selfishly hanging on to, rather than letting go, the now obsoleted, egocentric, I'm a legend, castle-building way of living. Making sense of your existence and healing your psychosis are very important activities to pursue, but they have to be tempered by the priority of the need to take up the transformed way of living that saves the world. And it has to be remembered that the transformed way of living is the best form of therapy for everyone's corrupted condition. So taking it up is actually the basis for the therapy that all humans need. These understandings do finally make the real therapy of our corrupted lives possible. And I and others in the Sydney WTM are writing a book about that real therapy that is now possible. So we are we're all fully aware of and recognise the importance of therapy. But while the priority is to save the world from imminent self-destruction through the adoption of the transformed way of living, such a selfish focus is another obscenity. I might mention that that this therapy book will be made freely available on our website when it's finished, and until then you can read outlines of it in Freedom Essay 63 and 64. There's a similarity between the transformed way of living and religious transformation that we can learn from. As I emphasised in chapter 9.5 of Freedom, the transformed way of living is not a religion, but both ways of living free you from your corrupted condition by living in support of something pure. In the case of religion, the pure life of a prophet, and in the transformed way of living, of a human condition understood pure new world. Well, in the case of Christianity, the 12 disciples, first followers of Christ, didn't properly see how the faith that Christ was introducing worked. I mean, venerating and worshipping Christ, as they did, was not the point. The real point of Christianity is to let go your embattled, overly upset, self-preoccupied way of living and instead defer to and live through your support of Christ. However, just as people have resisted letting go their upset way of living and taking up the transformed state where you live in support of the redeeming understandings of ourselves, so the disciples also resisted letting go their upset way of living and deferring to and living through the support of Christ. They complained that this is hard teaching. Who can accept it? It was actually St. Paul who came along afterwards, who realised the immense fall off your donkey relief that living in support of Christ rather than in the way your corrupted condition wanted you to live was how Christianity works. The disciples loved the soundness of Christ, just as people love the sound understandings of the human condition. But it is living in support of the understanding of the human condition that transforms your life and saves humankind. Unless you take up the transformed way of living, you are not making proper use of being able to understand the human condition. The truth is that the various pocketing the wind strategies are stupid ways to live, given the world-saving importance and phenomenal excitement and satisfaction of taking up the transformed way of living. So pocketing the wind is not an attitude that will be popular for long. There are other ways of avoiding the subconscious Mexican standoff feeling of being exposed and cornered by these understandings that dictate you have to leave behind your power, fame, fortune and glory, castle building or your pseudo-idealistic ways of feeling good about yourself and take up the transformed way of living. These include finding supposed faults with myself or the WTM, such as saying, since Jeremy isn't resigned, he can't properly appreciate the lives of people who are resigned. So I know better, and this is what everyone should do, follow me. There's the strategy of siding with the angels, as we call it, where you delude yourself you're an innocent person, uncorrupted by the human condition, and so don't need to become transformed. There's the ship at sea arrogance, where people who have managed to largely avoid resigning to living in denial of the human condition during their adolescence, those who refuse to pull into a port to escape the storms out at sea, as it were, that confronting the human condition causes. These people can feel so righteous and even innocent for not having resigned that they are not humble enough to admit their insecure egocentricity and resulting need to be transformed. Freedom Essay 60 has a good description of the ship at sea arrogance problem. Other avoidance strategies include saying, these ideas aren't original anyway, and I had already come up with these ideas. And for supporters of the New Age politically correct woke movements, deludedly saying, it's nice to have you join us in creating a compassionate world. Clearly, what is needed in this early shock of change stage, where all manner of procrastinations, exploitations and avoidances inevitably occur, is for exceptionally gifted, clear-sighted, St. Paul-like individuals to appear who are able to lead the way to a world where everyone is enjoying the all-meaningful and all-exciting transformed way of living, which is illustrated in the drawing of humanity's journey from ignorance to enlightenment by the person excitedly running to the all-wonderful transformed world. WTM founding member Anthony Tony Gowing and many other WTM founding members and WTM Centre members closely behind him is just such a leader of this great breakout for the human race from the fast-looming threat of terminal alienation and extinction of our species into a warm, sun, in other words, understanding-filled, transformed state of unimaginable relief and happiness. You can read and hear Tony Gowing's inspired teachings about the transformed way of living in the transformation section of our website. Okay, so finally, humanity is coming back home to peace, happiness, soundness, and sanity. I just thought it might be helpful to conclude this presentation with a summary of the human journey using the caricatures I've drawn over the years for all the different stages in our species and in our own immensely heroic journey. All these stages are described in Chapter 8 of Freedom. This first drawing of a mother and child symbolises the nurturing love indoctrination process that created our cooperative and loving moral soul and formed the original fully integrated state our ancestors once lived in, as depicted in this second drawing of the three people hugging each other. This next drawing illustrates how, when we became conscious some 2 million years ago, our original cooperative and loving instinctive self, the voice or expression of which is our conscience, in effect criticised our self-managing conscious mind's necessary search for knowledge, which upset us and caused us to become defensively angry, egocentric and alienated, sufferers of the guilt-stricken, depressing state of the human condition. This next drawing shows us trying to understand why we corrupted our soul and became sufferers of the agony of the human condition. Then, unable to understand why we had fallen from grace, in other words, become corrupted, we eventually, from about 1.5 million years onwards, or about 15 years of age in the case of our individual lives, began to resign to having to live in denial of our corrupted condition and take up a life seeking the artificial reinforcements of power, fame, fortune and glory to sustain our sense of self-worth. These next two drawings show how this defensive, angry, egocentric and alienated way of living developed more and more as our heroic search for knowledge, ultimately for self-knowledge, understanding of our corrupted condition continued. The first image describes materialism like fast cars and so forth, serving our need for escapism and ego reinforcement. This second image shows upset developing to the extent that we become extremely egocentric and in need of artificial reinforcement and defensive responses to any perceived criticism. This next drawing shows how upset eventually became so extreme that we adopted all manner of artificial, pseudo-idealistic, feel-good, virtue signalling ways of escaping feeling that we were bad and unworthy. Eventually, disillusionment with the dishonest, deluded, pseudo-idealistic life forced many to return to the earlier soul-corrupting but knowledge-finding, power, fame, fortune and glory hunting to sustain your self-esteem, which only led to even greater levels of upset, which is the hollow, no soul left at all extreme state of upset. The overall situation the human race had then arrived at was the completely alienated and mad state it has now ended up in. But then, on the threshold of terminal alienation and the extinction of our species, humanity's heroic efforts to accumulate knowledge has finally led to the finding of the reconciling, redeeming and healing understanding of our corrupted condition, which obsoletes all our old artificial power, fame, fortune and glory ways of sustaining our sense of self-worth. The initial problem the arrival of this dreamed-of understanding faces is that we've been living in such fear and denial of our corrupted human condition that we struggle to take in or hear the redeeming and liberating explanation of it. We suffer from the deaf effect. But then, after persevering and reading and listening to all the understandings of the human condition, we overcome the deaf effect and gain access to these utterly relieving and exciting understandings. But then, as we guzzle these understandings that finally make sense of ourselves and the world, we can become confronted by the exposure of our corrupted condition that the understanding causes. Basically, we can't absorb and adjust to all the liberating understandings fast enough to not experience some remaining fearful exposure from all the truth about how corrupted we actually are. In other words, while this exposure day or judgment day is actually a day of compassionate understanding, not a day of condemning judgment, there is still a potential to feel a degree of difficult self-confrontation. The solution to cope with that exposure is to not overly study the information more than our degree of soundness of self can tolerate. We only need to investigate the information sufficiently to verify that it's true, and then take up the transformed way of living, where we focus on living in support of this information that's needed to save the world. If we study the information more than our degree of soundness of self can cope with, we risk becoming furiously angry and defensive towards the information. An unconscionable response, because what we would be doing is condemning the human race to terminal alienation and extinction. The next problem is the Mexican standoff, where we don't want to deny or worse still attack the truth, but at the same time we are so habituated to living off our power and glory artificial ways of sustaining our sense of self-worth that we resist taking up the transformed way of living. We feel stuck, unable to go back and unable to go forward. In fact, this Mexican standoff can tempt us to pocket the win, as we call it, focus on benefiting from being able to understand ourselves and the world rather than focus on taking up the transformed state where we live in support of these understandings that alone can save the world. We can even be tempted to use the understanding to make ourselves an even more successful power and glory egocentric castle builder, which is the opposite of letting that way of living go and becoming transformed. Eventually, however, everyone realises that the transformed way of living is the only responsible way to live, and it becomes a universal practice. And the human race is then freed at last from the human condition, and joy and happiness comes to planet Earth. So thank you all for listening.
Oh, I just have to jump in. That was just so good watching it together. It's just such an important video. I mean, just all of us being able to see our place in this big, brave, courageous human story is just mesmerizing. It's just so exciting being part of this momentous time in human history now that the human condition is solved. I mean, the thing which is so amazing to me is it's just such a positive, big paradigm shift. So given its enormity, you know, it just makes total sense that it's a shock of change for us all. But what's just so wonderful, important, and just so reassuring is that it can be managed with understanding, just as we've seen from Jeremy's incredible video. It's just, to me, it's just the most important golden explanatory gift of self-awareness to my heroic, but, you know, understandably defensive, distressed, fragile, and deeply insecure self. And this is our guidance. It's our precious life-giving manual just to manage this all meaningful, all serious, but all understood and therefore exciting shock of change for this conduit generation, which is us, which we're just so lucky to be a part of. I mean, when we let this truth in, this love, we just have this compassionate home in this video, in this understanding all the time. And we always have this guidance to refer to keep our mind just understanding, you know, what's happening in us. And that is just, and it keeps our mind focused completely on the all important and all wonderful transformed way of living, which is just so important because that's what actually takes humanity from that torturous wasteland into that just incredible glistening sunshine of that pure state of freedom for the whole of humanity. I mean, I just listening to Jeremy in the video now where he said, you know, with understanding of the human condition now found, we're no longer trapped in Plato's dark, cold cave. You know, we can actually come out into the warm, healing sunshine. And, you know, our insecurity about our corrupted state ends. I mean, just hearing those words and Jeremy saying that is just, it's just so amazing. We really can live in that wonderfully transformed state of freedom. I mean, it's just watching it again, it's just incredible to me. In 1 hour flat, Jeremy's love of the human race has just so compassionately taken us all through those predictable stages that we all need to be really aware of through this passage of play for humanity. And I just love that word predictable, because what it sort of tells us is that these stages are actually inevitable for humanity to go through, plainly evidential and totally make sense, which allows us, I don't know, I just think it allows us all to be sensible and responsible and self-aware. And it's actually, as you can see from that video, it's so imperative that we are, because as we see here with this shock of change video, or we might be reading the transcript or booklet, of course, the serious danger that these stages can pose for humanity, and to the pure freedom that actually is on offer for humanity now. So it's a very serious thing for us all to be aware of. And honestly, I just got to say, I know all about these predictable stages. You know, I've been through many of them, and just understanding what was going on with this video, which this video allows us all to do, has just saved my life 100 times over. I was just, I don't know, I was just such a terror-stricken, just fearfully insecure, totally preoccupied with my pain girl. And I tried many times just, you know, to run back to all my coping strategies just to manage it, which, while obviously understandable, is just actually ludicrous. You know, it just totally unnecessary and pure hell. So especially, like, I know the human condition solved, so what really helped me every step of the way was just understanding what was happening in me and why, and also realizing it's actually just one of these predictable stages that going through this shock of change that humanity is going through. So it just made total sense and sort of just allowed me to relax and realize I just have a choice. Like, we've all got a choice now every step of the way. Whereas once we actually didn't have a choice. Denial and delusion was just our only option. But now we have a choice to actually let in this life-saving truth about ourselves. Just let my worry, shame, guilt, anxiety all be taken care of. And just when you do go to the solution, you go to the transformed way of living and live in support of this information, honestly, when you do that, I promise you, everything is just so taken care of and you're just so happy and excited, fulfilled, and your life just becomes just so meaningful and purposeful. And it just never, ever lets you down or humanity down. And it's just like Jeremy says, you know, it's almost too much for the human body to bear. But, and the bottom line is, as I was watching that video, I was just thinking, you know, this is what humanity has fought for 2 million years, for this day that all of us are here for. We're just so lucky to be part of this conduit generation. It's all we've ever wanted, obviously. And also just the point that was really important to me is that it's a completely logic-driven stage, which Jeremy has shown us so compassionately, and we can completely understand it and manage it. We can choose the path all the time of just living in support of this information. And every time we do that, it looks after us and the whole world. It literally does take humanity from that torturous road or that hellish road of just terminal alienation and extinction, and puts it straight on the path to just the glorious sunshine and a world full of pure freedom, real love, endless relief and happiness for every human on earth. I mean, just like, I don't know, I always think of what Annie Williams says, you know, the pain just stops with us. I just think, oh God, that is just so good. But there's just one more thing. I know I've spoken for a while, but there's just one thing that when I first watched this video, that I just think it's so serious and can't be underestimated. As it says in WTM FAQ 6.8, as Jeremy Griffith says throughout his writing, all of the giant strides in humanity's journey of demystification, our species' conscious thinking self's responsibility to replace mystery, superstition, and dogma with knowledge met so much resistance that in each the insights were lucky to survive. Science historian Thomas Kuhn emphasised this point about there being no guarantee new ideas in science will survive when he wrote, "In science, ideas do not change simply because new facts win out over outmoded ones. Since the facts can't speak for themselves, it's their human advocates who win or lose the day." And that to me is just, we just can't underestimate the seriousness of that. But it's sort of not a given that humanity will make it. But to me, that's just so exciting in that, yes, it's very serious, but it can actually be our inspiration, that it's up to us and it's our responsibility to ensure humanity has the state of pure freedom and actually goes to back home to a place of pure understanding. And that responsibility is absolutely fine, because we have this manual of understanding, that so we can all just be calm, sensible, and importantly self-aware, and just completely understand all about these predictable stages as Jeremy has laid out in this golden manual. And it's just, what's so important is it's a completely safe, trustable home, and it's forever underpinned by the bedrock of first principles scientific knowledge that allows us all to know our fundamental goodness. So anyway, sorry for taking so long, but I just loved it so much. And just so important for us all.
Yeah, wow, that was brilliant.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's so true, Stace. It is just a magnificent presentation, and like you say, that it's it is a strange thing. Everything about the human condition and understanding the human condition is a change. That's why there is such a big shock, and that's why it is such a big change. The world is absolutely cactus without understanding, and we're going from a place where basically everything about our whole world and ourselves and the way that we live is about resisting understanding, resisting thinking, resisting going anywhere near the deep, dark depression that's inside of us all that we haven't been able to explain. And, now we can go there. Now we can think about it. Now we can understand it safely. And not only that, but, we can take ourselves to the most exciting, liberated place ever. And that's the journey. We've got to let ourselves hear the logic, and at first it's strange that you get a document like this. It's like, the greatest information ever to exist on the planet Earth, which saves us, stops all the suffering, is going to take humanity forward to just the most amazing transformation within ourselves. To the abilities of humans are going to and the lives of humans is we're being liberated from having to, we've had to just focus on avoiding this deep, dark issue within ourselves has just stopped us from being able to basically do anything normally, do anything naturally. We're just totally at a loss. But all of a sudden there's this logic, there's this understanding, and it's just piece by piece by piece. And we've just got to slowly let that into our minds. And the more of us that come across this, and the more we get used to the whole situation, what the human condition is, that we can talk about it, that it's safe, that all our crazy behaviour, as crazy as it is and as insecure as it is and as mad and destructive, it's okay. It had to be like that. But more importantly, we can move on. And that's what we're just learning. Look, this is where we've come from. We've got the answer to where we've been. This is where we are. We're in this absolutely, horrible state, but it's been absolutely as it has had to be. There's no other way. But now we can move on, and it's just building that logic, building more and more people come across understanding the human condition, more people being able to cope with what's being said, more people sort of finally getting the idea that this is a compassionate, upheaval of truth, if you like. We're bringing up all this truth, but it's totally and utterly compassionate, and it looks after us and it soothes us. And so much of what we're fearful of is just fear itself. We just feared that there wasn't an answer, and there hasn't been. So it was fair enough that we were fearful. It was fair enough that we had to block it out. It was fair enough that we had to, go out and prove our worth in all manner of craziness. But now, as Jeremy said, there's just absolutely no reason to go on with all that anymore. The depression and the cause of the depression and the whole reason for it and the fear has gone. And that's what we've all got to get used to. It's like when, that's like I was brought up that chasm drawing before, there's this massive chasm and it just runs all the way through the whole image, and it's just so overwhelming and it's just everything. But in actual fact, that whole chasm, the abyss, it's not real anymore. It's just been soothed. That whole area in that whole of that drawing is going to be covered by that beautiful golden, freedom-inducing bridge that just allows us to walk straight across. We can leave all of that cave, dead-like existence area behind. The terminal alienation, does not have to happen. We don't have to live like that you know, and that golden area in sunshine and knowledge and understanding and total compassion for ourselves and everybody else, and being able to understand the world and have complete and utter meaning in the world is absolutely, you know, just unfathomable. And so, I just got to say that bit at the end, the addendum, the summary with all of Jeremy's caricatures is just, fuck me, it's so good. Honestly, you could look at every single one of those images and you can just stare at it for hours, because every face, every little, element in every one of those drawings is just perfect. I mean, it's so hilarious, sort of, in so many ways now, how, accurate it is and what humans have had to do, but it's also like it's really confronting, because this is, God, it's been crazy, the human condition. And that little, it's like, I don't know, there's 20, 30 drawings, I don't know, but that's our whole story, and it's just sort of, it's so beautifully there from start to finish. We developed consciousness, we messed the whole planet up, then we got depressed, and we're just sufferers of the human condition, and then here we are coming out the other side. So it's really, really exciting where we're up to, and but I just so agree. Just getting used to that logic. This is information we can understand every single element of our life, and we don't have to. That's a wonderful thing, and just getting used to that. Look, we can understand this process, and our job is purely on Earth at the moment. We've just got one job: to accept the understanding of the human condition, to allow it into our lives, and then help everybody else to understand it too. And then to live free of ourselves, move on from the human condition. It's just going to be a block in our history that we had to participate in. We had to work and slog and be unbelievably courageous. But now we can just move on from it and just live in absolute joy. And so, sorry, I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to someone else.
I'm happy to just feed my contribution in. I'm not really going to cover anything more than what both Stace and Tone have just said. The main thing, that there's so many facets of it, but the main thing is just how helpful it is. It's just so instructive, and I just used the word in my mind that it is a roadmap, and I think Jeremy uses the description of around it being a handbook to make this transition. And I think one of the things that is really important for me is just the essential concept of the shock of change, in the sense that, and understanding what shock actually involves, and that is that it actually does distort and disrupt your ability to think and feel and to process information. And against the backdrop that everything that, like you've been talking about, Tone, with that crevasse of depression, that once this topic of the human condition is brought into focus, we actually do, it's an accepted phenomena. We do suffer shock. We do experience disorientation, and the thing that's a really important concept to be aware of is that we're actually unaware of that shock. So we've got reactions that are going on inside us, both in terms of how we think and we feel, but we're not aware of that. We're disconnected from that. So we've got these responses when we start to engage with this information that engages with the human condition. There's thoughts and feelings that are swirling around in us that alter our perception and influence how we process that information, but we're not actually aware of those deeper currents. And like you just touched on before, Tone, that all of those reactions are predicated on fear that the human condition can't be broached. And I just like that concept that the shock of change. When you start, particularly if you're newer to this information and you start engaging with it, holding that concept in your mind, even as a hypothetical, that okay, what if this is actually what it's saying it is, and what if I will experience this shock, and what if I will actually be having reactions that I'm unaware of, and they may influence how I feel about this. And what I really like is that this helps me. I've been around this information a long time, but I find it enormously helpful. It's like you was talking about, Tone, that it's giving us a depiction of what we actually think and feel, what we experience as we move through our journey of digesting this information. It's a vocabulary. It's giving a language to all these predictable stages that we encounter, and it allows us to place ourselves where we're at in that journey and get sort of some transparency, some objectivity. And because it can be disorientating, but because it's those, whether it's those caricatures or what have you, they allow us to, in a sense, see through what we're thinking and feeling. So if we're, Jeremy uses the description of these various procrastinations, exploitations, and avoidances. And I, like you both, Stacey and yourself, have talked about, I deeply relate to the mental gymnastics and the machinations of coming to grips with this information. And this document allows me to place myself and to go, okay, no, despite what I'm feeling here or thinking, what I can actually know what the deeper driver is here. This is what I'm actually experiencing right now. Is some particular manifestation of that procrastination, exploitation, or avoidance, and that's all right. It's, as like Stace was talking about before, it's predictable, it's inevitable, and that in itself just takes the heat out of it. There's a compassion, a relief in actually identifying what is going on in you. Like when we all know it in ourselves, when you're responding to those surface reactions, it's an agonizing, stressful, you're in a sort of a divided state. You've got no solid footing. You're sort of, at one level, you're at war with yourself, because on the one hand, you've validated this information, you know the logic of it, the logical implications of it, and yet there's these feelings that are swirling around in you which are at odds with that. And that's a difficult, divided place to be. Whereas when you get that transparency, you actually find some solid ground, a foothold. And I know myself, there's an immense peace, relief, joy in finding that solid footing and actually knowing what is actually going on in me. And like I said, there's a compassion in that, and it's actually a validation of everything that's being said here as well, that this is not just some sort of abstract intellectual exercise, the human condition, shock of change, like at one stage I was thinking, this is not like a board game. Like it's not, this is real. The human condition's real. It only feels strange because day to day, it is just so foreign to us. So when this guy is sitting there talking about, look, you're going to go through all these predictable stages, it's not like, oh yeah, right, yeah, I'll look forward to that. I don't really know what you're talking about. I can certainly vouch for the fact that as you go through this journey, you deeply, you can look at a particular caricature with, the bloke with freedom under his arm and still hanging on to his crown or whatever. And I go, yeah, I know exactly what that's all about. And, but that being on the inside of the truth of that, having that vocabulary, that depiction of that, is just so helpful. And my last point about one of the reasons I find it so helpful is that, because like Jeremy says there at one stage, this is what's really important here, is this change of mindset and taking up the transformed way of living and enabling a proper use of the understanding of the human condition. And what this document for me is so helpful is that it quickly allows me to, in a sense, check in with myself and get my own equation in proportion, in perspective, And when you're caught in one of these avoidances, procrastinations, and what have you, you're very inward focused. It's very preoccupying. It basically can spend a lot of time dominating your sort of your existence. Whereas when you've got a framework like this, you can quickly just go, no, look, what I'm wrestling with there is that particular avoidance, procrastination, or whatever. And it takes the heat out, and it sort of, in a sense, rights the ship. It allows all that preoccupation to immensely subside. And then what you can start to see is, hang on, what's the bigger picture here? Okay, it is all looked after. The fact that I'm experiencing all these things is actually not cause for reservation that this is the human condition that has been solved. That's actually all further proof and evidence that it has been solved. I'm just experiencing the growing pains, the adjustment pains of that in myself. And all of a sudden, you're able to then focus outward. That preoccupation starts to just sort of collapse right down. And then all of a sudden, you're in a much better position to just go, okay, you're more outward focused in terms of, well, what is actually, where am I living as a human in the human journey? That's right, the human condition has been solved. What's important? Okay, it's about supporting this project, doing whatever I can. It's about working on this the transformed way of living, and then tuning into stuff like Tone talks about, where ultimately living for this project that's the ultimate way of looking after all these personal machinations, our insecurities, and what have you. It's actually getting outside ourselves and getting into that new way of living that really looks after all that insecurity, all that mess, that ugliness that we've unavoidably got as having grown up with the human condition. So yeah, anyway, just from my perspective, it's just such a it's just so awesome. And just one very quick point, it's just like, even I was thinking, Jeremy uses the word devious maneuverings or strategizing, right? And on the face of it, you look at that and think, that seems like something ugly. It can induce a sense of being bad or shameful or whatever. But that's my main point here, is that, yes, it is an obscenity, but you can look at that in a judgment neutral way, not condoning it or letting yourself off the hook, but you can understand where it's coming from. And when you can't accept that, you're in a dead end. You can't move on. Whereas when you use this, what's being described here, it allows you to honestly accept what is going on. Okay, I am being devious. I am procrastinating, exploiting, avoiding in some shape or form. I know why that. There's a framework for that, but I can let that go, and I can move on. And it's just that's that same thing. It isn't a harsh teaching. It's not gnashing of teeth. That this is a hard teaching. This is compassionate. It's honest. It's an objective, factual take on your situation, and that's just, in my view, just immensely helpful. And it just like what Tone was talking about before, it's so much about getting accustomed to that, and then, like I said, from my perspective, it allows me to move from being inward focused and that having just dominating my worldview to actually being able to see what's really in front of me. So yeah, can't emphasize enough that how good and how helpful I find it.
Beautiful, Sammy. Thank you.
Awesome.
I just should say that we managed to get Reggie on the line from our Eastern Cape Centre in South Africa. Yay! We're so pleased to have you here, Reggie. I introduced everyone at the start, but we weren't sure if you'd make it, but I just wanted to say welcome. And I just love Reggie's video where he on his centre website, where he talks about, where you talk about, Reggie, that this answers the previously or the thus far unanswered questions at the core. And that just says it all to me, because, we can, from there, it's possible to extrapolate, to explain everything, including what we're talking about today, which is this how to live with these and manage the shock of change that these understandings naturally bring, which you're all talking so incredibly about. but it's an absolute lifesaver. So anyway, welcome, Reggie.
I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. I came in a bit late, but I'm happy I managed to, in the end, show up. Anyway, I only have a few comments on this particular presentation, because a lot of maybe what I would have said and more has already been presented by the previous speakers, from Stacy all the way to Sam. So thanks for that. One particular thing I'd like to mention myself is that Jeremy, in this presentation in particular, has highlighted all the possible pitfalls and all the areas where one could, get stuck. And he's also pointed to a solution as to how one can navigate past those particular, stumbling blocks. And when he does that, I find out that the solution presented is actually very simple. It's very simple, in that one doesn't really have to wrestle with the problem as such at that level of the problem. It's just, as this says, a change of heart. You just got to have this change of heart and look at things differently, and adopt this new way of, moving forward, this transformed way of living, instead of having to wrestle with the particular challenge that one may be facing at a particular point in time. I like that because once I understood the human condition, and then I wasn't expecting so much, in the form of challenges past that, but beyond that, having understood that, I found that there were some radical emotions that were sort of coming like in between. You see, as if I had no understanding. I had the understanding, but my emotions were not there. Still are not there to a great extent. But anyway, so I love very much the way that Jeremy has made that presentation. It makes one very, comfortable. You sort of grow into it. You allow yourself time. You grow into it, and steadily one moves forward. So I'd like to very much, thank everybody here for being patient with me. Stacy, Tony G, all the way up to Sam. Everybody, Gary, thank you guys for Karen. I see you all, come on. Thank you for being for your patience and everything. It's great to be here always. Thank you very much. Bye now.
Thanks, Reggie.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. I mean, I just love hearing you speak. It's just so calming, and it's just so authentic. I kind of, I'm a bit in awe of you, to be quite honest. So it's absolutely awesome to have you here, mate. And I just can't agree more with the point you made. Just the simplicity of the transformed state is what I just absolutely love about it, and that's it. It just gives us a path for all of our lives. I mean, I'm a particularly messed up individual in terms of sufferer of the human condition, and so that's why. I mean, everyone needs the transformed state, but I just love it so much because every element, big, small, medium, it just doesn't matter. It's all dealt with by making this transformation. Like, here's the old world over this side, and it's completely messed up, and you can't understand it, and there's no meaning. And I hate being egocentric, but I've got to be, I had to be massively egocentric, and I hate being dysfunctional, but I was incredibly dysfunctional. Just everything about it. But over here, it's just joy upon joy upon joy, and it's just making that shift over to the right side. Like, what if I just stop being confronted? I don't need to be confronted. That's what this information is saying. What if I just stop from sort of fighting it all, focusing on myself at all, and just making that shift to just living in support, stopping what I'm doing. Everything I'm doing is about trying to, look after the human condition and defend myself against the human condition. I don't need to do that anymore. And once I start just living in support of this and just striving every single day to free every single human, free myself, free the world, it's just joy upon joy upon joy and freedom upon freedom upon freedom. That, like you say. Anyway, I just love what you said, because it is just the core point of everything. I just love it. We just make that simple mind switch of, going from the old world to the new world. Well, that's one of Weave's most famous lines. All you do is you take yourself from over here to over here, in one of the great WTM speeches of all time. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, well, it is. I mean, it is wonderful that it is that simple, and it does just come down to that change of heart and seeing what's in front of us. But I mean, I know for me, I do consider that this document to be a lifesaver, because when I first came across these ideas, I absolutely loved it. I loved them. I loved being able to understand everything around myself and in myself. It was just incredible. There's just nothing compares. But I know that very quickly, despite that, all of these feelings that I had no idea what they were coming up in me, and that wrestle that Sammy talked about. And of course, all of that is there, and of course I felt all of those things. But being actually having the explanation for all of that is just so special, because there is so much fear associated with this subject, and all of these stages. I mean, the Mexican standoff and pocketing the win and getting angry and resentful towards the information, despite how much I knew it explained everything about me and looked after me in that sense. Those feelings were there, and so the more we can understand it, the more that fear dissipates, and so having it all spelt out so beautifully, and as Jeremy has done with absolutely everything, he explains the human condition and explained our dark side. He's explained that we once were loving and cooperative, not brutal and savage as everyone's been led to believe. And he explains why there's this great sense of guilt and where that comes from, and how deep that is within us, how many millions of years we lived in this cooperative and loving state, and the guilt that we feel for having destroyed that is immense. And so we do live in fearful denial of this subject. And so he's explained all that, and then he's explained how we live with that. He's provided the solution to that in the wonderful transformed state that we can all embrace now, and then explaining all of these different stages, even writing a therapy book to help with the inevitable need that people will variously have to therapize all of the pain inside them. So it is just the most incredible platter of information and management guidance that we all need. So it's just the most wonderful document, and it can be like I experience that even now, and all these stages are sort of, you feel like you can go through them in any given day, and as Jeremy said, that reaction of just seeing black marks on white paper. You can be so disconnected from this, and Sammy was talking about that as well. But it is when you actually, your mind is calm, and and that's a state that you can get to when you have all this understanding and explanation in place, to approach this in a calm and rational way. And your mind is able to open up and actually hear what Jeremy's saying. It's just the most astonishing and freeing and completely liberating of all your upsets and your pain and your reactiveness and your defensive reactions to what you're hearing. Everything really disappears, and yes, this wonderful new landscape opens up before us. It's just anyway, I'll stop talking now. I think Karen was about to say something before when I interrupted.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I just think the whole, it's just really inspiring just to be here and listening to Jeremy talking and just being with all of you as well, because it's such a big paradigm shift. It's just absolutely huge. I mean, we're just going from living, in complete denial of the human condition to having it completely exposed and explained and defended. But it's just such a big change to kind of go from, like, you're saying we have to go from there to there. It's like, it makes sense that because it's such a big paradigm shift, that there's a process that we're all going to need to go through to kind of go from complete denial to completely living in full support of these understandings. So kind of, to me, it makes sense that there's a process that we're each going to go through. And I think that this shock of change video and the document is just really powerful, because I really liked what Sam was saying when he said that, that you can be really unaware of what these reactions are, doing, inside yourself. You can be really, like you're saying, Vivi, you can love these understandings, but not really fully understand why you're not supporting the project, or why you're still kind of stuck in this halfway landing, not really doing anything. You don't really know why. And you can get more and more distressed about that because you don't understand why you're stuck, and you don't want to be stuck as well. And so it's a real, a lot of these procrastinating stages, they're not pleasant, but you do have to navigate them. And with this information, with this shock of change document and the video, you can do that. So you can navigate them, because suddenly Jeremy's explaining what's happening. So, okay, well, and I think that just puts you in a position of being empowered again, because you're being given the information that allows you to understand what's going on. So then you can respond to it. You can then manage your situation better because you understand what's happening inside yourself. So when I sort of first read this document whenever I first came around, it was a couple of months ago, I just thought it was really, really powerful, because suddenly it explained why I was getting stuck and why I wasn't living in full support of the WTM all the time. And so I got really excited when I first came across this, because I thought, this explains what's going on. And from there, I sort of took Jeremy's advice and looked at Freedom Essay 33 and how to become transformed. And I, from there, found that really impacting after having watched the shock of, looked at the shock of change document, because then Jeremy kind of takes you through how do you go from the Mexican standoff to, how do you then actually take up the transform state. He goes through the actual step-by-step of how do you actually do it? How do you actually let go of your resigned state and move into the transform state? So that all for me was just hugely impacting. I just, it really made a lot of sense to me after having lived with these understandings for a few years. I kind of reached that point where I was like, I want to be living in support of these understandings, but I don't know why I'm not. So all of that was just really helpful for me. And I think when you kind of take yourself back to the Adam Stork story, then, we are all defended. So, it's inevitable that we're going to go through these stages. We're not bad. Jeremy has, with first principle based biology has proved that, we're all fundamentally good and worthy to be here. So, but we are psychologically upset. So we're upset in our minds. And so it makes sense that it's going to take time for us to take in the understandings that are going to relieve and heal all that upset, and then decide to take up the transform way of living that actually will support everybody. And And I was just going to say as well that I really loved what Jeremy said about how the transformed state actually provides the basis of therapy for us all, because I think that's really true. Because when you decide to start living in support of these understandings, make them a priority in your life, there is, when you sort of decide you're going to make that commitment and in yourself, is not really, you know, it's a commitment you're making inside yourself, really, I suppose. But when you start to live in support of these understandings, you are helping other people to find the information or to understand it or to help their digestion of it, your own sort of sense of security with the information does start to develop as well, because you're actually living out the real reinforcement of your worth that Jeremy has given us. And, you know, he's saying that when you actually live in support of the WTM and these understandings to become publicly and widely accepted, then that, you know, you're actually using the correct way of being able to understand the human condition. And so when you do start to do that, you know that you're still an insecure person, you know where we're coming from with the human condition, but you start to get more and more comfortable with that, and that's okay. And that you start to lose focus on yourself and how worried you are about how exposed you are, and you start to just become genuinely very concerned about the fact that the human race is facing, you know, extinction because of the human condition. And that does start to genuinely become your concern, that you want to see this information progress into the world and become accepted in the world. And and I was just going to read a little bit from chapter 9 of Freedom, because I just wanted to sort of encourage people to just, you know, keep persevering with the information. And even though, you know, you might come across these procrastinations, then to persevere, because when you actually do make it through to the transformed state, it's just so exciting. Like Jeremy says, like, you know, your body can barely contain the excitement, because like your whole body just feels full of energy for this. And so it's such an energized, you know, exciting, meaningful life to be living, that you just can't imagine doing anything else once you move into that state. And you just want to make sure everybody, you know, makes it into that and makes it there. So I just wanted to read a little bit from chapter 9, that how the transformed life force way of living will quickly repair the world. And in at the end of paragraph 1237, Jeremy says, the world transformation movement provides the only path forward for humankind. Anything else represents ever-increasing, excruciating, unthinkable suffering, and ultimately doom for our species. So what everyone can now and should now do is become a member of the world transformation movement and adopt the transformed life force way of living. Because when this fabulously empowering breakthrough explanation spreads like Desjardins anticipated it would, the transformation it allows will become the main objective of all nations. Then, with everyone's help, we will each be able to rehabilitate and make environmentally sustainable our realm, our home, our community, our region, our country, and then our world. For 2 million years, humanity has strained with every fibre of its being to achieve this great breakthrough from ignorance to enlightenment. And for those of us living now, our wonderful opportunity is to implement the rewards of that achievement. Here comes the golden sunshine revolution. So it's just, I mean, it's just such a big deal. Like, you know, it's such a big paradigm shift. It just affects everybody and the whole world. And so, yeah, I mean, like when I think about like how big it is, you know, the whole of human society, the whole world, every nation, every country, every, you know, everywhere, is all geared, the way that our whole world is set up is geared towards the search for self-understanding. It's the search for it, but the search is over because we've got all the information that we actually need. So the search is over. So the way that we're living in the world now, if we're still living in the old resigned way of living, of artificial reinforcement of our worth, that's obsolete, that's over. So we need to find out what's the real reinforcement, because that's available. So, and then we need to live through that. So, yeah, that's me.
Awesome.
Bloody good, Karen. Bloody good. You're a joy to watch, that's for sure. And listen to.
And you're wearing this year's fashions.
Yeah, you are.
Oh, yeah.
Last year's
Yeah.
fashions.
Yeah.
Love the t-shirt. And your pendant.
Oh yeah, this comes everywhere, the pendant. But when I got the T-shirt, my 6-year-old boy said, "Oh, is it mine?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm really sorry. I bought this one for me." He's like, "Where's mine? When's mine coming?" So I've got to make him one as well.
Yeah, it's lovely.
All right. Well,
I
oh, go ahead.
go
No,
for it.
go ahead. No, please, Stefan, go.
Go for it, Stefan.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to say I really love this presentation. I haven't even seen it before. I just got word that it's out for a few weeks or months already, and I missed it completely. I was almost in shock when I watched the video. But I don't know this angle. I haven't seen this video. That's new. So it was very, very inspiring to watch it and to see just how instructional it is. And I can't help, also like in the lead up to this meeting today, like thinking about, a few years ago coming across this information, how the status of the WTM and the whole movement was going on. And today I started realizing, oh my God, there are 33,000 people now in the Facebook group going to watch this video. I need to cut my hair, I need to be sure I'm ready for this. So, and it was really worth it. It was a very special presentation. I find had a huge impact. And I love the comments, what you all said, all those things. And two things that it's just because those two things stuck with me. Is like when Sam was talking, just this idea of what if that's really true, what if that's the reason why this is going on? What if I am really confronted is the summary I would, like, what if I'm really confronted to actually consider this instead of thinking like, yeah, like I'm understanding a little bit more, yeah. Instead of making it this intellectual pursuit or something, I don't even know. But what if I'm really confronted? What if that's true? And then I only wrote this sentence down afterwards because actually it was inspired by Tony's sentence. What if I just stopped being confronted? I never asked myself the question this way. Obviously, like we're talking about confrontation the last few months more also, and discovering it and trying to pinpoint it more and more. And I find with this presentation, it's like, it's perfect. I saw all the different stages. I think I checked all of them already. And will probably still continue doing so to some extent. So it's not, but there's so many things that are important about this. But one thing that comes to my mind is like very early in the video when Jeremy is talking about adolescence as a description, for our struggle to human condition. And adolescence is the state when we search for our identity. And so we did that. We couldn't find it. So we had to, the truth became so confronting. So we had to deny it, and all those sorts of things. And I think, it's just very strong description. And this idea of, we are adolescents really. I mean, we're all trapped in grown-ups bodies, and we seem to be adults, but there's not a single adult running around anywhere, apart from us being able to transform into one. So for me, like, I don't know if you want to even call it a metaphor or whatever, but that's the image that I like so much. That this transformation is really about growing up, which was impossible before. We had to pretend to be grown-ups, and that's why children don't want to grow up. It's a terrible thing. And when you grow, if I had never grown up and whatever, and now we can grow up, and this opportunity there, in the combination of opportunity and responsibility, obviously, because if we talk about future generations, the children of the future, guess what they're going to need? Some adults, and that's what we can do now. And with this instruction, I think it's incredible just to see the development there. And the community, and how people can talk about this information is that's just that must be so useful for people listening. And I just really hope I can rewatch this video somewhere. I took so many notes and also from what you guys are saying. So I think it's tremendous and a huge effort. And I don't even know, what to say about it, but I really, really love that. That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, Stefan. Sorry, well, go ahead, Jerry.
No, okay. No, so it's just it's great to be here. Hanging out with all you guys, watching this video again. And it's just, I guess for me, I am just thrilled that Jeremy has shed light into the cave wall, right? Into the walls of the cave where the shadows were in my life, where the shadows were, and they were everything in my life. And now, I see that it's there's a new world, right? There's a new world. And I guess what I really appreciate is, I think what Jeremy does is he shows us a mirror. He shows me a mirror. He shows me a mirror in all those stages that I can definitely relate to. He shows me Adam Stork is a mirror into my soul. And not only does he shows me that mirror with science, with first principle science. And one of the things I really like about, part of the whole story here, there's so much, is that we have been gifted. Jeremy's proven, he's shown us that we've been gifted with this incredible quality that we've developed, which is this intellect, this conscious mind. And it's a beautiful thing. And one of the ramifications of this human condition in society is that the mind has been demonized, like by the New Age movement and so forth. And the mind, and that you can understand. See, if you understand the human condition, you understand why the mind's been demonized. It makes sense. But Jeremy's given us this basic, took the scientific method, applied it to the question of what is human behavior, what is, what's the structure, what does it mean to be, what's the essence of what it means to be a human being? And then he boiled it down to the first principles that we can cognitively, each one of us, very simple logic, each one of us can cognitively grasp it. The challenge is, because the death effect, because resignation is so terrifying, right? That moment of resignation and the repression, just now, so with that understanding of resignation, when you can bottom out on what that is, then you can understand what the death effect is, right? And then it's, thank God. What I say is thank God, thank integrative meaning that I came across this information and I was able to access it the degree that I have, and I continue every day. But I mean, it is a process, and all those, I can relate to every stage. And Jeremy just put a floodlight on the whole thing. In the first video on the website, what is the first thing he says? He says, what the most wonderful gift you can possibly imagine. I don't say it as well, but what if there was a thick wall holding between you and that thing, and there was a set of instructions that you could have, right? Well, you would follow those instructions, wouldn't you? Yes, of course. And that's what I love is every time Jeremy produces something, video, book, whatever, and now we're part of that, right? So every time we echo that, we're part of what Jeremy's sharing, right? The truth that he's shown us. But every time he lays it on the table, it is shedding light on truth, right? But it's not truth that we have to have faith or believe in. It's truth because our cognitive mind can grasp it. So that's what I love about with this whole idea of the transformed state. As much as I can get my arms around it, and every day I'm trying to, understand it. But what I'm feeling is that what Jeremy's asking us to do in the shock of change is get to the point using your own, stand up, get to the point where you can use your own cognitive mind to follow. And it's all in Adam Stork, although there's layers and layers and freedom of all supporting information. But if you can get that biological explanation and the basic logic of it, and then you understand that it proves that it's the equivalent of facing judgment day now, which is, it's just mind-bogglingly huge how terrifying resignation is. And facing judgment day now, which is the strategy has been, we don't have to worry about that till we die. That's so horrific to think about, but we can face it now and check the box. right? It's like moving over the hill. Just check the box. It's done, right? So all that, and I love, Tony, when you talk about it, wrestling, that wrestling that in your head of that self-validation, insecure, it becomes constant. It's a din. I lived that way for decades, and it's still there echoing, but I've got some instructions now. Anyway, I've got other notes. I love the soul soundness quotient. I mean, that's just awesome, right? And and the other thing is one last thing that it is absolutely terrifying to look in the mirror the way Jeremy is inviting us to do, to really look, not just wear on all the masks, because we go to the mirror, we're wearing the mask. But it's one thing to look in the mirror and then not be preoccupied with what that looks like and what everyone else might think that looks like. And I'll admit that was my preoccupation. I mean, that filled my head all the time. But the intellect is so powerful that I could find a way to function in that upset state and actually make some wins, along with the losses. Anyway, I just love the fact that it's, and I think several people said it here tonight, that it's so, the fundamentals are so simple, right? So we don't have to have an authority tell us something that we have to blindly follow. Jeremy's not asking us to do that. I don't think that's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing Jeremy saying, hey, listen, you human beings are an amazing thing. You're a amazing thing. You can figure this out. I figured out this part. It's pretty big. I want to share it with you, and we can step right there with them. Anyway, this is the only important subject on the planet, as far as I'm concerned. And the death effect is very real, which means, unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing you can just tell somebody about and they run with it. So in my daily life, I have to deal with that. But I am finding more and more, I just feels genuine compassion for people. Because, and one last thing, I've heard some smart people that I have a lot of respect for said, all men are created equal, right? And that's a nice idea. Jeremy's proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt, and that changes everything. And so I'll let it go there. But I'm just thrilled to be here, guys. Look at all these faces, and just part of this the most important movement on this planet. Absolutely critical. I love it.
Well said, Jerry. That was really special.
Yeah, good on you, Jerry.
Thanks, Jerry. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I say something too, please?
We
Sure,
love
Nick.
you
I
too.
get nervous. So anyway, I love all of it, and I love the prezzo. I actually hadn't seen it before either. It just flows so naturally and so easily to understand. For me, the shock was really, really big. At the start, I was just so happy and just laughing and just like, yes, I can understand stuff. And then that happiness kind of subsides, and it is the shock of really having to look at yourself. But I think part of that shock too is you're using your brain literally for the first time, because in the cave we are zombies and we're just faffing around, just I don't know what I used to do. I used to do it all the time, but so the shock is going, oh my God, I can look around and understand myself and understand others. Part of the talk that hit me too is like, when you're new, you're like, what does this all mean? Like, I love all my stuff and all my fake stuff because that sustained me. And then it's like, what do I wear? What do I wear to work? What do I do with all my handbags? And in the speech, Jeremy's like, you keep it all. You don't have to let go of it, but it no longer makes you a good person, if that makes sense. Like, I've got all that stuff, but I don't need that anymore to make me feel worthy. I have myself and the understanding of myself and of literally everybody to sustain me now, and have like a future that is really positive and really meaningful and really compassionate. So yeah, I just love all of it.
Beautiful, Nick.
Yeah, good stuff.
And just to read that, because it's an important point, what he says in the shock of change at paragraph 20, I should clarify, as I do in paragraph 1231 of Freedom and in Freedom Essay 33, that the focus in leaving the old world of artificial reinforcement isn't on giving up your possessions or walking the streets in sackcloth, in self-denial and servitude. We're talking about a change of mindset that can have an effect on your priorities, which can affect your choice of possessions and so forth. But self-deprivation isn't the point. The point is that we have this new way, this new priority, this new way of thinking about what's important and what we, as you said, using our minds for the first time, and it's like Jeremy's bubble drawing, where you're living inside your bubble. You can't see outside of it, and you can't see all the behaviours that you're living off, and you think that is everything that you need to sustain yourself. But this allows us to get outside of our bubble, and all of that stuff stays. The last drawing, you're sort of outside the bubble, but it's still with you. And it's like in Freedom Essay 33, the person sitting on the cusp of the hill, cheering, that crazy person, messed up person, heroic person that's doing all this mad, deluded, but all these behaviours that we've developed, and like that awesome drawing at the end of the shock of change that Tone was laughing at while we were watching this person. I don't know if you can see him, but just absolutely mad. And we keep on going with all that mad behaviour, but now we can let it go, put it in the suitcase, it's gone, and take off up the hill, and you can even, encourage, keep going, great, I'm just going to go over the hill and, see what's happening over there. So you just completely leave it behind. It's so sort of preoccupying, but we can leave it behind and move on to this beautiful, completely understood and meaningful for all of humanity future, and live there and preoccupy our minds with that, and instead of all this defensive crap that we've had to for so long, we've had to live in that horrible, horrible darkness. And this is the end of all of that. The beginning of light and happiness and love for everyone.
Yeah, that's that thing about that, giving everything up and stuff. It's just like, it just becomes everything in the old world, like all the ways of dealing with it, because we couldn't understand or explain or know anything, everything's just a sort of a guess in a way, Like, so it all becomes this sort of dogmatic insistence. Everything is just like, now look, so something comes along and says, now look, you've got 10 handbags, that's just too many. That's bad. You are selfish and materialistic, you know what I mean? Which is just, the whole thing about this is being able to explain, obviously, that having 10 handbags, good on you. Of course you needed 10 handbags. You needed to look after yourself. You had to make yourself feel good. And so it's absolutely fantastic. But obviously, you're not going to need your 10 handbags anymore. But the point about it is not to be able to walk around and say, look, you're bad with 10 handbags. It's just more, no, I understand now. I have the absolutely irrefutable, unshakable, unbreakable first principle knowledge that 10 handbags are just completely unneeded. They're silly. Look at the bloody things. Absurd. handbags, right? It completely in the face of, you know, hopping over the other side of the hill. And hang on a minute, we're going to stop a child from ever feeling any, you know, sort of hurt, insecurity, and having to go and buy 10 handbags of their own, you know. It's like, but that's the amazing thing here. We're not, there's no, this whole revolution of the world, this, you know, transformation to heaven on earth or nirvana or whatever, however you want to describe it. You know, that's the magic of it is the brilliance, and why this is going to work is because it just makes perfect sense. The logic is what's going to drive us all there, and we can understand it. It makes sense. The old world is now over. And the more we understand it, it's just the more ridiculous it is. The more, I mean, even saying it's ridiculous is a bit harsh, because when we're going to be just so compassionate towards it, it's just going to be a fait accompli. Look, yes, you know, of course, I lived off owning a Mercedes Benz, or I lived off having my piece of shit car because it just proved that I didn't care, or whatever it is that you lived off, you know, of course you did, and that's fine, but yeah, it's massively important. Everything about what this understanding is, that the responsibility is to let all that go. But it's not, you know, a forced thing. It's just purely, look, I understand it, and that is a waste of time now. It's just last year's fashions. And this year's fashions is to go and stop, you know, children having to grow up without understanding the human condition. And that is a joy upon joy upon joy task in your life, and that's what you find. It's just everything in the old world and everything in our lives is that, you know, ridiculous, self-centered, you know, situation, and we can leave that, but we just do it compassionately and lovingly and slowly, you know. We won't be out, maybe we can't throw out all 10 at the moment. But, you know, we can probably get rid of 5. And then maybe next time we'll get rid of them all. And that's how it's going to work. And the more people who come along, the more ridiculous it's going to be, the easier it's going to be to throw the bags out. And everyone's just going to be charging down the street, not giving it an absolute... Remember, they even had handbags. You know, anyway. But it's a good example because, you know, it's just exactly sort of how it works. It's like, you know... We've got all this stuff that we hang on to and we no longer need it, but there's just something just way, way, way better, way, way, way more meaningful, and it's just amazing and you know, critically important and all the rest of it. So anyway, good on you for saying it, because it's all, you know, they're so good, those things to just think about and sort of laugh at or whatever, just to help us.
And like at the start, it's so serious, and now you can laugh at it. But like, yeah, as a new person, you just like take your time, like you guys have said, and then it just kind of slowly, like that, the importance washes off you or just loses its power over you. And what's more powerful is this information. But yeah, love all your handbags, because I still love mine, but I don't care about them, if that makes sense. Okay, bye.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, can I chime in there?
Hi,
Can everybody
James.
hear? Yeah, thanks everyone. It's been from Stacey's introduction on you said pretty much what I wanted to say too, and then everybody else adding in their seriously key insights. It's just mind blowing. You know, when I read Shock of Change, it was a shock. I mean, it's labeled that, and it's a bloody good reason. I didn't realize how shocking it would be, even though I've read most of what was in there before. But I think, you know, Jeremy used 2 words, nonplussed paralysis, right at the beginning, which I went and had to look up what nonplussed means, and it actually means bewildered and unsure what to think, say, or do. And that's exactly where we are at this stage. I think when I brought up that last picture, of where we are now, Yeah, and the previous picture to that is that totally whacked out, mad hero on earth who's now smoking a cigar and going crazy. That's where I was not long ago. But then that last picture where we are absolutely psychologically and neurotically messed up to hell and gone. I mean, that's where we are, and that's what I've struggled to get. I can see it out there, but I couldn't see it in myself for so long. And this document brought it right home to me. It said, Moffat, that's who the fuck you are, excuse my language, but that was the shock. And with that, stepping back, look at the whole document. It's, as Jeremy says, right at the end, it's exciting, but hell, we've got work to do. It's such a beautiful, phenomenal, brilliant, accurate description of our journey, but also it's the perfect addition after the great guilt. I couldn't think of anything better at this stage of our journey, because it's not only a clarion call to us who are at the forefront of this at various degrees, and those that understand it on the Facebook group, and those that are quiet. It's a serious wake up, guys. We've really got to, this is the book that is going to damn the Amazon and block it and turn it around, because it is just so powerful. And sure enough, as Jeremy says, we've got to, and everybody says, we've got to go to the interview first, the great guilt first, after that, and then this, because throwing this at someone who hasn't had the interview introduction, those first things, it's going to knock them. And it gave me a good knock and a wake up as to where I was, and still carry around still. But yes, I think it's one of the best things I've read for a hell of a long time, yeah, that's going to keep me cooking for quite a while. But on that, I think there's not much I can add more. But really good to see you guys, and I'm sorry Reggie's disappeared, but I think he enjoyed it as well. But yeah, thank you all. It's been just a mind blow again, as usual. These things.
Thanks, James. Yeah, it's so true, isn't it, that the last place we look is inside ourselves. You can see the human condition around you. It's so much easier to do that than to look inside and see it in yourself. It just reminded me actually because we posted an early version of the Shock of Change document on the Facebook group. So everyone might be a bit familiar with that as a written presentation. And there were some really great comments there, and one of them was from Emily. And there was just a really lovely back and forth that she had with Tone, which was quite, I won't read it all, but she just said, I've just finished reading Freedom. I thought something amazing and transforming would happen immediately. Instead, I started involuntarily verbalizing my anger and resentment, mostly when alone driving, and the nasty, shitty person I am came right out of my mouth. Previously so politically correct, it was a shock. But reading your post about the shock of change, I just saw the pretense in my own and everyone else's lives. This is all just make-believe. It's false, it's a farce, the whole thing, a show, and nothing else. I want out. I want to see what's really going on. I'm so tired of all this bullshit, fake acting out a life, which isn't a life, isn't worth living. She goes on, now I don't know what's going to happen to me with this understanding in the meantime. Shock, it's the least that can happen. I feel I don't need to read more about the understanding for a little while, but I know I will. Thank you for this post. I woke up from a semi-hypnotic state. The so-called veil has been lifted and I can see what's behind it. It's one thing reading and understanding, but there is a further level, and never could I ever have imagined that it existed, let alone experience it. And Tony Gowing, in his reply, said, thanks so much for telling us about this. I have been exactly where you are right now. Yes, all the truth initially feels like it's too much. It's too hurtful, too embarrassing, too scary. That if you let the devil inside yourself off the leash, you don't know what would happen kind of thing. but what we realise is that we can accept the truth now it is here. In fact, it is the only way out. And in fact, it isn't hurtful. It doesn't kill you. You don't self-implode from guilt, because this time, we have the answer, the defence that protects us and looks after us and gives us an unshakable grounding of understanding, security about the world and everything about ourselves, and why it's all been like it's been. Anyway, I really send all the love and best wishes in the world, Emily, because this is all such a big step in our lives. But just remember, you will never lose what you're seeing now, even if it gets a bit overwhelming and you step back towards the cave entry. From here on, it's just a matter of getting better and better at seeing the truth, which is it's just so true. Allowing it in and then dealing with it compassionately and sensibly and calmly through understanding. There truly is horror everywhere we look, outwardly and internally, but it just doesn't matter anymore, not one bit. It is all looked after, explained, and can be put in our glorious golden suitcase of understanding. And Emily replied to Anthony Gowing, thank you, Tony, yet again. Seeing outside the cave has never before been possible except for those few unresigned human beings throughout history. Now we can all see it. What a wonderful world it will be when everyone can see and drop the facade. And a complete turnaround, and no more self-destruction or planet destruction or cruelty to animals. Having the privilege to promote this is so honourable, and finally our existence does have meaning. Keep well, you are needed. Absolutely.
Wow, that was just such a special thing to listen to, Weeby. Thank you. It's just like this whole this whole discussion here is just so incredibly precious. And I'm just a bit overwhelmed, because one thing that I really just can't stop thinking about is just how what Jeremy says often is how he's just leading us around by the hand in this forbidden room that we've never been able to open or talk about. The human condition has just been such an off-limit subject, and he's showing us the way the lights have come on. We're coming out of the dark, and it's just such an incredible time and to be alive and to have this information, to be able to understand ourselves. And of course, just that shock of change document, just how incredible that is. Just like, I think, I can't remember who said it, but it's instructional, just so instructional in terms of leading us through the different stages that we're inevitably going to witness within ourselves as we progress through understanding the human condition in ourselves and in the world, so that we can go from looking inwardly and so distressed about all the confusion and pain and horror in our lives that we can't make any sense of, to suddenly being able to go, oh my gosh, I can make sense of all of that. I can look outward. I can now participate in this world. I can see a world. I can see a Garden of Eden of humans living free of the human condition, knowing for the first time, like that wonderful, wonderful T.S. Eliot quote, our round of departure has now ended, and here we are for the first time. I'm not getting the words right, but you get the gist. Jeremy often talks, what we humans, our conscious thinking mind needed was brain food. We've been anaesthetizing it for so many years, for 2 million years of horror of trying to live with the human condition, to cope with not being able to understand. And we can stop that now. We've got the brain food to bring that all home. And anyway, I don't really have anything to add. You've all just spoken just so beautifully, and everyone, I just wanted to just say that, and thank you very much for all being here. It's wonderful.
Thanks.
Good stuff, Sal.
Yeah, it's really precious hearing everybody's different in ways of how they interpret it, and I hope that that's helpful for everybody watching on. Yeah, it's been great. So unless anyone has anything further to add, that's it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Well, it's just been a treat to, hear Jeremy speak and explain all that and give us a path. just locked in, and I just know I've done rounds and rounds and rounds and rounds of, you know, what the path is, and I mean, even trying to explain it to people, and just it's such a tool for us to be able to play our part in history, which is to build this critical mass and be part of that critical mass, and stand shoulder to shoulder with everybody who understands the human condition, and you know, try as best we can to show the way to freedom. You know, we know freedom's here, and you know, just got to, you know, help as much as we can to try and get this you know, truly amazing information out there. And Jeremy's just given us another, I mean, it's hard to describe, another, you know, pile of jewels upon, you know, I don't know, flowers and sunrises and everything beautiful on planet, but just piles of them, every document, every bit of information he gives us, because, I mean, he's just free of the human condition, and we're not, and that's amazing to be around a person and be able to hear them describe what the world is like and what we can look forward to. So
yeah, there's nothing more precious.
Yep. So yeah, if any of you, if you've got any questions, get in contact with us, ask and help us. Come and join the Sunshine Army to a world in sunshine, because honestly, the rest of the world is just dying in pain. This is the only way out, and it is so good, it's not funny.
Awesome wrap.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks to all our little panel.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bloody
Yeah,
good to
thank
see you all.
you.
Bloody,
Yeah,
really
wonderful.
lovely.
Thanks, everybody. That was so good.
Thanks so much, everyone. Well, we'll see you again soon.
See ya.
See
Bye,
ya.
everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.